Russian flight to Hong Kong is in serious trouble.
The other way! The other way! To the left, now to the right.
Gravity has become a deadly force as the crew fights to keep the plane from falling to Earth from 10,000 meters.
Get out! Get out! Back!
The cause of all the chaos, a 15-year-old is at the controls.
Get it left, the ground is right there! 3,000?
We're not getting any oxygen. We have this terrain alarm. Aero Peru 603.
We are in an emergency.
Come and sit in my seat. Go on.
Pilot being filmed.
Are you filming?
It's a family outing. A proud pilot taking his kids on their first trip abroad. But in just a few minutes, their vacation will turn into a terrifying fight for their lives.
Hold the control column. Just hold it. Back, back!
Investigators would be amazed. How did a 15-year-old kid end up in the pilot's seat, flying a brand new passenger aircraft?
The other way! Back!
March the 22nd, 1994, Moscow. 15-year-old Eldar Kudrinsky is going abroad for the first time. He needs every gadget he has.
Eldar, Uncle Volodya is waiting.
I'm ready, I'm ready.
Come on.
But this is no ordinary kid. Eldar's father is Captain Yaroslav Kudrinsky, an international airline pilot. In Russia, that means membership of a privileged group and access to luxuries most of the country can only dream of.
Okay, let's go.
Ah, Captain is here. Now we can take off.
Hello, Uncle Volodya.
Hello.
Aeroflot allows pilots' families to travel once a year at a discount. So Captain Kudrinsky is taking his children on a 4-day holiday to Hong Kong.
Mom, it won't all fit.
Anybody would think we're going for a year.
Where is your daughter?
Listen to the music in a car. By the time they're our age, these kids are going to be deaf.
What?
Deaf.
Pardon?
Captain Vladimir Makarov, Volodya to his friends, is an Aeroflot pilot too. He's also going to Hong Kong on holiday and will be keeping an eye on the kids during the flight. Mrs. Kudrinsky is only going as far as the airport to see them off.
Eldar, Yana, promise you'll call as soon as you get there. Volodya, you will make them call me?
Yeah.
We'll call as soon as we can, okay?
Come on, come on, come on.
Yaroslav and I love to travel, and so did the kids. They love seeing new places, learning new things. There was a chance for them to come along with their father, and they jumped at it.
Eldar and Yana aren't the only ones boarding Flight 593. Most of the 63 passengers are businessmen from Hong Kong and Taiwan, looking for opportunities in the new Russia. Others, like Adrian DeVille, have come from London, flying Aeroflot because it offers a cheap connection to Asia. He's the manager of a camera shop in northern England and has a passion for aircraft. In fact, he's going on a 2-week holiday to Hong Kong to photograph the new airport they've just built.
He'd go as far as he could. If he thought there was a good airport somewhere in the world, he'd try his best to get to that airport just to go and make some nice photographs.
And the trip to Hong Kong grew from that because he wanted to see this brand new airport, which was a feat of engineering at the time.
Mark Newport is a British sports promoter who lives in Hong Kong.
Mark was in the army, was in the forces, and he went to Hong Kong and he just loved it, and got married out there. chosen Aeroflot. I'd never heard of it until then, because it was just a cheap flight home.
In 1994, Russia is in a state of great change. 3 years earlier, the old Soviet Union finally collapsed. A new Russia is bursting out from behind the torn Iron Curtain. Its people want the freedoms of the West, the lifestyle, the international travel. But Russia's state-owned airline, Aeroflot, is getting a makeover too. They struggle to buy 5 new aircraft from the company Airbus Industry, the $70 million state-of-the-art Airbus A310-300. Though it seats fewer than 200 passengers, it can fly 3 times further than any of Russia's biggest passenger aircraft. The A310 is a fully automated aircraft equipped with sophisticated fail-safe systems. Aeroflot hopes it will help improve the company's checkered safety reputation.
Anytime there is a national carrier supported by their particular government, if that government is in turmoil, whether it's financially or political turmoil, it affects everything that's associated with that core government. Aeroflot is a national carrier, and so there's always the perception that they may not have had the monetary resources and the wherewithal to be a very structured carrier with a lot of oversight to ensure a high level of safety at that time.
Aeroflot has created a new, prestigious division around the Airbus fleet, Russian International Airlines. Pilots wear special uniforms, they fly state-of-the-art planes, and travel to the world's top destinations. RIA represents a new, modern Russia to the world.
After collapse of the Soviet Union, Aeroflot, still controlled by government, was forced to look for profits and develop a network which would be commercially justified.
For Russia's premier airline, Aeroflot handpicks an elite corps of first-class pilots. Each of them has thousands of hours of flying time, impeccable safety records, and fluent English. They're given special training by the manufacturers of the aircraft, Airbus Industry.
The airline had around 3,000 pilots at that time. Only 16 men were to be sent to be trained first. Only the best of the best made it. Kudrinsky and I started working here at Sheremetyevo at the same time, and naturally we first got acquainted simply as neighbors. Then we found out we were both pilots. Later, we both trained for the A310. We studied together.
I remember how hard it was for them to master it, because the technology was quite different. So they were working very hard, but they all got through it and started to fly.
Yana and Eldar are finally on board the new plane they've heard so much about from their father.
Hey, now you two behave, or Uncle Volodya will push the eject button.
Kudrinsky has 900 hours of flying the A310 under his belt.
I must go now,
It was their first trip abroad, but naturally, they had come along with him on other trips within Russia. They were quite well traveled for their age.
First, Captain Danilov will command the flight through the busy flight corridors out of Moscow. Relief Captain Kudrinsky will then take over. When he does, First Officer Piskarev becomes his co-pilot. All 3 are first-class pilots. On this new A310, the flight deck is fully computerized. Like other state-of-the-art aircraft, it's equipped with a sophisticated autopilot that can fly the plane for long stretches of the flight. International routes, like this one to Hong Kong, are Aeroflot's lifeline. They bring in precious hard currency at a time when the domestic market is struggling to turn a profit. Flight 593 takes off at 4:39 p.m. local time. Then it will join the Trans-Siberian Airway, flying east towards Mongolia and China. It's a smooth flight. Only 4 hours into the 10-hour trip, they've just passed over Novosibirsk in Siberia, almost halfway. But Eldar and Yana are too excited to sleep. Having negotiated the busy airways out of Moscow, First Captain Danilov takes a rest break. He hands over control to Relief Captain Kudrinsky, who now becomes acting captain for the next leg of the journey.
You have control.
I have control.
Still awake?
Yes, why?
Shall we surprise your father?
The cockpit?
Hmm?
Oh, yeah.
Would you like that? Okay, let's go.
Aeroflot's most technically advanced aircraft is now cruising on autopilot at 10,000 meters. It's a calm, windless night, but the peace will not last. The pilots and crew will soon be fighting to save the lives of everyone on board. One of Aeroflot's new Airbuses is on a direct flight from Moscow to Hong Kong. Captain Kudrinsky is taking his children on their first trip abroad. They're about to pay him a surprise visit.
Have some very important visitors. Shall I bring them in?
Okay. Come on in.
Oh, hi, Dad.
This is First Officer Igor Vladimirovich Piskarev.
Hello. So, what do you think of our new airplane?
It's very nice.
It's amazing.
So it's quite different from our old Russian planes, huh?
Daddy, what's that?
Well, this is a flight computer. It flights the plane. It does everything automatically. Now, come and sit in my seat. Would you like to? Come on.
It's a quiet flight. Many passengers are sleeping, unaware of what is taking place on the flight deck.
Daddy, can I turn these?
Yeah. Now, Yana, would you like to pilot the plane?
No.
Put your hands on the control column. Come on, go on. But, you know, don't touch any buttons, okay? Especially this red one, autopilot switch. You don't touch it, all right? Okay.
Kudrinsky turns the heading select knob. It doesn't disengage the autopilot, but allows him to turn the plane slightly to the left. It makes his daughter think she's flying the aircraft. The artificial horizon shows the plane is banking slowly left. This instrument is vital when you can't see the ground, as it shows the pilot how level the aircraft is in relation to the horizon.
Oh, it was you. You turned the plane.
Kudrinsky now puts the aircraft back onto its preset course, while First Officer Piskarev radios local air traffic control with their position.
Novokuznets, this is SU-593, flight level 330, heading 105.
Flight 593 is now over 3,200 kilometers east of Moscow, near the middle of Siberia.
Sierra Uniform 593, Novokuznetsk, flight level 350, heading 105.
Sierra Uniform 593, estimating Zakir at 1759.
Now it's Eldar's turn at the wheel. He's been waiting a long time for this moment.
Pilot being filmed.
Are you filming?
Yes, I am.
Can I turn this?
Yeah, but if you turn it to the left, where will the plane go?
Left.
Right. Look out to the left, watching for the ground when we're turning.
Eldar finds the control column quite stiff. It seemed to move easily when his sister was doing it, so he tries harder. But he can't make the plane turn because the autopilot is keeping it on course.
Is the plane turning?
Suddenly, the column turns easily.
Wait.
Is the plane turning to the left?
Yes, it is.
set the horizon to normal for him.
Once again, his father switches the heading select knob back to its original setting, ending the turn and Eldar's illusion of flying the plane. Captain Kudrinsky then selects navigation mode. It tells the autopilot to put the plane back on course to Hong Kong.
Dad? Dad?
But Eldar is still holding the wheel to the left. It's become stiff again.
Can I go back to my seat?
What for? You'll only go to sleep, and don't run in the first class. They will fire us.
Eldar now turns his control column slightly to the right, enjoying his time at the controls.
Well, I am going shopping on Temple Street. It's a famous market that only open at night.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
It's been just over 3 minutes since Eldar sat down in the pilot's seat. The plane is tilting sharply, a turn that's getting steeper every second. The plane seems to be turning by itself, but no one seems to know why.
Some kind of zone?
We've gone into a zone, a holding pattern.
Have we?
Of course we have.
An arc has replaced the straight direction line on the screen. The arc looks like a plane in a holding pattern around an airport. As they study the screen, the plane continues to turn. It's now banked at 45 degrees, which is steeper than what it was built for. Suddenly, the command bars disappear from the primary flight display. The crew no longer have any information about course or heading. The plane is flying at 650 kilometers an hour and banking hard. Like a quick turn in a sports car, the dramatic movement of the aircraft begins to push everyone into their seats.
Guys!
The A310's autopilot works to keep the plane aloft. Suddenly, the nose pitches up. The increased G-force makes it difficult for Piskarev to reach the controls. He does his best, but nothing happens. Piskarev's hard turn to the left has had no effect on the plane.
Hold it. Hold the control column.
Eldar is the only one with both hands fully on the controls. He can only follow the most basic orders. He can't get up because the speed of the turn is pushing him back in his seat.
To the left. To the left. To the left. Now to the right. The other way.
I am trying to get left.
Okay, get out.
Eldar has been in the pilot's seat for just over 4 minutes. And now he can't leave. His body feels twice its normal weight.
Get out. Get out.
Kudrinsky can do nothing but struggle against the crippling G-forces. The aircraft is plunging towards the snowy earth, and there's nothing anyone can do.
Crawl out to the back. Get out. Get out. Get out.
Russian International Airlines Flight 593 to Hong Kong is in serious trouble.
There's the ground.
The pilot's 15-year-old son has been at the controls for 4 minutes. The plane is turning steeply and losing altitude.
The other way!
Captain Kudrinsky desperately needs to get back into the pilot's seat, but he can barely move. The plane is turning so steeply and so quickly, the G-forces on his body make it feel like it's twice its normal weight. Everyone on board now feels the force of the plane's dramatic movements. His plane is in a serious crisis, but Captain Danilov can't get to the cockpit. He too is squashed by the powerful forces created by the plane's extreme bank. The plane still isn't responding. To add to their confusion, an alarm begins to sound. It signals the complete shutdown of the autopilot. The plane is now completely in the hands of Piskarev and Eldar. And to make matters even worse, there's another alarm.
The other way. The other
The
way.
plane is about to stall.
To the left.
An automatic safety system kicks in to keep the plane flying. It lowers the nose and puts the Airbus into a steep dive to regain speed.
There's the ground!
The plane dives at a frightening 40,000 feet per minute. For the people on board, it's like having an elevator fall out from under them. In just seconds, the heavy pressure of the high-speed turn is replaced by near weightlessness. As the plane suddenly drops away, it's now a very dangerous environment. People and objects that are not secured will land anywhere once gravity returns. They'd been flying at 10,000 meters, but now they're falling fast. Unless they do something quickly, they will hit the ground in less than a minute. Piskarev pulls back on the control column as hard as he can to bring the Airbus out of the dive. The nose finally comes up, and the aircraft begins climbing quickly. Gravity now returns with a shock. As the plane climbs, the rapid acceleration pushes people down relentlessly. The dramatic change in speed makes everyone feel 4 times heavier than normal. Meanwhile, First Officer Piskarev is still trying to gain control of the aircraft.
Thrust levers! Too slow!
Piskarev has pulled the aircraft out of the dive, but it's climbing too quickly. The engines on the A310 don't have enough power to push it almost vertically into the sky. The airspeed drops dramatically. The plane strains to climb, but it's been pushed too far. As the force of the acceleration eases, Kudrinsky leaps into action. But Piskarev has stalled the plane. The nose drops into a corkscrew dive. Now the Airbus is twisting towards the ground from 6,000 meters at a breathtaking 70 meters a second.
Full throttle!
For the first time since the crisis began, captain and co-pilot can work together to save the plane.
Full throttle, no? I got it, I have full throttle! Got it.
Kudrinsky pumps the rudder, the vertical surface on the tail, to help break out of the spin.
What's the speed? I don't see it.
At last, the plane seems to be responding. Working the rudder, Kudrinsky has nearly stopped the corkscrew dive.
Coming out. Coming out. Too much speed, ease back on throttle a bit.
After a desperate struggle, the 2 pilots have managed to pull the plane out of its terrifying spin. They're starting to level out, but still not completely in control.
We'll get out of this. Everything is fine. Easy. Pull backwards a little bit.
In all the chaos of the past few minutes, the pilots don't know exactly how far they've fallen. Suddenly, they run out of time.
Sierra Uniform 593, this is Novokuznetsk area control. Please come in.
500 kilometers north of the Mongolian border, air traffic controllers in Novokuznetsk wait for Flight 593 to radio that it's left their control area.
Area control, please come in.
Less than 2 hours later, the first search party goes out to look for the Airbus in the frozen, rugged Siberian wilderness. They finally locate the remains of Flight 593 on a wooded hillside about 100 kilometers east of Novokuznetsk. It's soon clear there are no survivors among the 75 passengers and crew. This was a brand new aircraft, fitted with the latest technology. What could have brought it down? Why was there no warning, not even a distress signal? The Russian media are quick to speculate. Could it have been a terrorist bomb?
When I was in Moscow, the news we had that it could have been a terrorist act, because we had terrorist acts on aircraft previously. We was completely unaware, other than that nobody had survived it.
For some time, they wouldn't tell me anything specific. And only on the next day, the airline director told me there was no hope whatsoever. It was a horrible moment, of course.
Очень страшный момент.
Horrible.
Очень страшный момент.
It's hard to believe.
Aeroflot flies the families of the deceased out to Moscow. Among them is Brenda Clark, the mother of British passenger Mark Newport.
We met my daughter-in-law there. They've told us, you know, it's cordoned off. We can't go down there. And she said, you can go down there, Bren, because the Chinese are down there. They have to do rituals and things, you know. And so she said they're down there. That's when I knew they'd lied to me and said that it's cordoned off. And that's when I told them, I want to go down, and if you don't take me down, then I thumb a lift.
The authorities take them to where the plane crashed. Relatives of Chinese victims drop pieces of paper with messages written on them. Others throw flowers.
Yeah, that was really moving. We had the flowers, they had the little, they wrote messages on, I think, on these pieces of paper, and they threw them out. It's lovely. Yeah.
The Russians take the families to a morgue in a town near the crash site, where the recovered bodies are being held. Many are too badly mutilated to be identified. They ask the families to look at recovered items of clothing to help identify the bodies. Brenda Clark finds her son's family photographs. It sends a chill through her. For the first time, she knows for certain he was on the flight. The recovery operation gets underway. The Russian government mobilizes 238 soldiers, police, investigators, and rescuers. Everyone in the aviation world wants to know how a brand new state-of-the-art Airbus could fall out of the sky without any warning. Does the A310 have problems no one knows about? They need to find out fast. Chief Accident Investigator Ivan Mashkivsky is in charge. The crash site itself offers few clues. The ones he does have are puzzling. Unbroken bottles of champagne, a flight attendant in an oxygen mask, and finally the body of at least one child thrown into the cockpit. The plane's digital flight data recorder indicates the engines were running when it hit the ground. He rules out engine failure. Mashkivsky needs the expertise of a man who knows the A310 well. Someone who can also recreate the fatal flight and find out what exactly went wrong. Vladimir Biryukov is an experienced test pilot and crash investigator at the Gromov Institute in Moscow. He's an expert on the A310 Airbus. Biryukov was directly involved in testing and certifying the aircraft prior to the Russians buying it.
Because of the fate of this plane, the fate of this airline, my first reaction was shock. How could such a thing happen? All I knew was that the plane had crashed somewhere over Siberia. I remember spending a sleepless night, distraught, and trying to figure out what might have happened and what could have caused it.
Yeah, come.
I think you should come and listen to this.
Each investigation begins with a complete analysis of the plane's cockpit voice recorder. This time, it reveals something disturbing.
Now, come and sit in my seat. Would you like to? Come.
Daddy, can I turn these?
Yeah.
Kudrynsky was in the pilot seat, wasn't he?
According to the diagram.
Can I turn this a bit?
Yeah, but if you turn it to the left, where will the plane go?
Left.
Right. Look out.
Again.
Can I turn this a bit?
Yeah, but if you turn it to the left, where will the plane go?
10 years ago, it wasn't unusual for people to be invited up to the cockpit. Of course, since 9/11, it's become a lot tighter, and you will find cockpit doors are locked generally throughout the flight.
Every country sets its own rules as to who has the authority or the access to the cockpit. In some countries, it's up to the captain, so the captain can invite guests up to the cockpit. But to have them actually manipulating the controls of an airplane, regardless of whether they have people on it or not, the fact that this was allowed to occur is definitely an exception in the industry.
Dad, can I go back to my seat?
The two investigators are stunned by what they hear on the cockpit voice recorder.
It's unbelievable. These two youngsters, the ones who we couldn't identify, they were not thrown into the cockpit by the crash. They were his kids.
And they were flying the plane.
The investigators are speechless. How could 3 experienced pilots allow children to fly a commercial airliner? They're about to learn something even worse. The children are only part of the problem. A little-known feature of the plane proved deadly.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Turning to the left. The other way. The other way. To the left now. To the right. The other way.
I am trying to get left.
Okay, get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get to the left. The ground is right there.
Russian investigators listen to the cockpit voice recorder of an Aeroflot Airbus that has crashed in Siberia. What they hear makes their blood run cold.
Full throttle. Got it. Got full throttle. Full throttle. No.
You should understand the frame of mind of the father. He is very proud of what he's doing. He invites his kids into the cockpit. Strictly speaking, it's a violation, of course. But I know such violations do occur in real life. I'm not condemning him or defending him here. What I'm trying to say is that no disaster occurs for just any single reason. There's always more than one, all coming together.
But this time, it really does look like a single cause. A child flying the plane. And it sends shockwaves through Aeroflot's higher echelons.
No, I think it would benefit them.
Investigators feel the pressure. The media has learned that Eldar was at the controls. Aeroflot, trying to improve on its Soviet-era image, wants to minimize the damage. Boris Rybak is an aerospace consultant in Moscow.
Aeroflot managers and executives indeed try to conceal results and try to downplay importance of this accident because it was very embarrassing.
Managers at Aeroflot aren't the only ones following the investigation. Airbus, the European company which made the plane, is also intensely interested.
Ivan Efremovich, what's wrong?
Nothing.
If the accident was caused by Eldar, it will vindicate Airbus. At the same time, grieving families are also clamoring for answers.
Are you sure?
For Mashkivsky and his team, it's a delicate balance.
There is always more than one reason for a plane to crash. And we must find it.
I'll do my best.
His reputation, the reputation of Airbus, as well as Aeroflot, all now depends on finding this other cause.
This was an international flight. It was a Western-built aircraft, and it was inevitable that the investigation that would be conducted by the authorities and the inquiries that would be conducted by claimant lawyers would expose information.
At the same time, manufacturer of the aircraft, Airbus industry, was very keen to get as much realistic explanation of what happened because the reputation of this aircraft was at stake.
What I objected to was the way we was treated by Aeroflot after the accident. They wouldn't tell us anything what was going on. They denied everything. I wanted to know why my son died. I wanted to know why these men had been allowed to do such a thing. But all we got from Aeroflot was blank, blank, blank. Every time we tried to find something out, they just didn't want to know.
Families aren't the only ones desperate for answers. Vladimir Biryukov continues trying to learn all he can about why the Airbus fell out of the sky. Analyzing information from the flight data recorder, he can trace and repeat every command given to the aircraft during the flight.
We were trying to get as close to the truth as possible, to find the cause, because that was the precedent. The first foreign-produced plane to crash while flying for a Russian airline.
Don't run in the first class.
The investigation confirms the autopilot was on when the plane got into trouble. Even with the children in the cockpit, the plane should have flown on course. What went so terribly wrong?
So, any new developments?
We can discount Kudrynsky's daughter. She sat in the chair, but she didn't fly the plane. At 17:47 and 6 seconds, Captain Kudrynsky tells her not to touch the autopilot switch.
Her father gave the autopilot the command to turn, while Yana just rested her hands lightly on the controls.
It was you. You turned the plane.
But when Eldar took the controls, Biryukov discovers, something dramatically different happened. No one could possibly have guessed. Not even the 3 pilots in the cockpit. Biryukov may have found the key to the puzzle. The plane's flight data recorder shows that 2.5 minutes before the crash, while Eldar was at the controls, the autopilot partially disconnects. This is the start of all the plane's troubles. But how did that happen? The autopilot is a sophisticated computer which manages an aircraft's speed, altitude, and heading. Altitude and heading are controlled by 3 key functions. The rudder, which controls sideways movement. The elevators, which control vertical movement. And the ailerons, which are for turning. On Flight 593, the autopilot had disconnected itself from the ailerons.
And the autopilots that were used in transport airplanes years ago were an on-off. In today's sophisticated flight management systems, you can literally take fragments of the autopilot and disengage them, but not necessarily turn the switch off and turn it all off, unless you want to.
The question that really worries accident investigator Biryukov is how did the autopilot become partially disconnected? There's no mention of it in the cockpit voice recording. If this is a fault with the aircraft, it could prove fatal to future flights. The only way to know for certain is to reconstruct the accident on a flight simulator at Airbus Industries headquarters in Toulouse, France. Biryukov's experience as a test pilot and his detailed knowledge of the A310 is crucial to the investigation. Using information from the flight data recorder, Biryukov reconstructs the events, beginning at the moment Captain Kudrynsky allows his son to sit at the controls. A co-pilot will help replicate Piskarev's actions.
Look out to the left, watching for the ground when we're turning.
Unlike his sister, Eldar turns the wheel before his father can tell the autopilot to turn the plane. The controls are stiff because he's fighting the autopilot. In the simulator, Biryukov reproduces Eldar's every movement.
No, it's starting to go. Going. Going. There. Hold it long enough and it disconnects.
How long?
30 seconds. And it disconnects smoothly.
No warning.
No. Now.
No one in the cockpit knows it, but this is a critical moment. Eldar's resistance actually turns part of the autopilot off. It takes just half a minute, but from here on, Eldar is controlling the ailerons. Eldar is actually steering the plane.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
What seemed like an open and shut case is suddenly much more complex.
To the left, the back, the other way.
The 15-year-old flying the plane isn't the only reason they crashed. The discovery highlights an apparent flaw in how pilots are trained on the A310.
I got it, I have full throttle.
Accident investigator Vladimir Biryukov has finally discovered the terrifying sequence of events that made Aeroflot's Flight 593 fall to Earth. Captain Kudrinsky's 15-year-old son had turned the plane's control column against the programmed flight settings. This disconnected the autopilot without warning from the ailerons which turned the plane.
There. Hold it long enough and it disconnects.
How long?
The aircraft then began an uncontrolled turn to the right, which got steeper and steeper. But why didn't anyone realize the autopilot had disconnected?
Another peculiarity of the plane is that it has no alarm signaling the disengaging of the autopilot in the list channel. While our Russian planes have an alarm sounding in such an event. So I think that the captain allowed the boy to do it, irregular as it was, believing that even if the autopilot got disengaged, the crew would be alerted to the fact.
The A310 Airbus has only a small light to tell the crew the autopilot has disconnected. There's no alarm. And the Russian crew was obviously unaware of it. But there's also another reason why no one realized what was happening. The autopilot still appears to be working normally because it's controlling the plane's other functions. Although the plane is now banking, the situation isn't yet critical. At this point, if the crew takes the proper action, they can still stabilize the plane. Eldar is the first to notice that the artificial horizon is at an angle.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
The three pilots don't understand this at all. After all, Kudrinsky returned the flight to its autopilot heading. Makarov offers an explanation.
Going into some kind of zone?
We've gone into a zone, a holding pattern.
Have we?
Of course we have.
Increasing 1 degree per second. 27 degrees. Now we should be entering into the zone.
What's that?
A strange arc now appears on the navigation panel. It looks like the course a plane would take circling an airport waiting to land.
There appeared an arc very much resembling the arc that appears on the display when a plane enters a waiting zone. There are waiting zones around airports. When too many planes accumulate, they enter such a zone and circle around while they wait. But there could be no such zone at that point on the route. And yet we hear in the voice recording, "Hey, we're entering a zone."
This false holding zone distracts the crew for 9 seconds. In that time, the plane crosses a critical threshold. The Airbus is now banking at 45 degrees, far beyond its design limits. It cannot turn this steeply and maintain height. It's now losing altitude.
Guys!
But the Airbus autopilot is no longer controlling the ailerons. Its other functions try to compensate by pulling the plane's nose up and increasing power to maintain altitude. Passengers are pushed back into their seats. It's on the verge of stalling. It starts to shake like a leaf.
Hold it. Just hold it.
Part of the flight control panel now goes dark. It's a warning sign that the plane has gone beyond its design limits. From here on, the Airbus is out of control. By recreating the fatal flight, Biryukov has worked out how a lapse in judgment and concentration has resulted in a catastrophic crisis. But could the crew have saved the plane and its passengers? The pilots of Flight 593 tried to bring the plane out of its fatal dive by pulling up, but they go too far. The plane climbs steeply and stalls.
We're losing altitude.
Now we've started to spin, so what do we do?
It's coming out of the corkscrew.
Now we're leveling out. In a moment, we'll come out of the dive.
All they had to do was let go. The plane has an inbuilt survival mechanism which won't allow it to stall, even at very low speed. But the pilot has to know that.
But the situation is totally new to them, something they weren't accustomed to handling. A stressful and incomprehensible situation. It would have taken special skills to act correctly in such a difficult situation. It was not the crew's fault, but their misfortune, because if a person doesn't know how to do something, because he was never taught to, you can't really blame him.
The team's perseverance in an open and honest investigation did show that there was more than one simple cause behind the accident. Their findings benefited the whole industry, especially the revelation that the autopilot can partially disconnect. This remains a feature of the A310, as it enables pilots to control certain elements of a flight while leaving the rest to the computer. But crews are now made aware of this. Captain Kudrinski's misfortune is that it was triggered in a way that was unexpected and difficult to detect. The crash of the Russian plane comes at a troubling time for the airline industry. In 1994, the same year that Flight 593 went down, a series of crashes in the United States raised questions about how commercial pilots handle upsets, situations in which an aircraft finds itself in extreme flying conditions.
When we think about upset in a large airplane, we think about an attitude of the airplane that's beyond what normal flight regimes would be. That is, greater than 20 degrees nose up, greater than 10 degrees nose down, and bank angles greater than 25 degrees.
Within a year, the industry had begun offering pilots upset recovery training, teaching them skills to handle extreme situations like the one on Flight 593. The tragedy of one trip to Hong Kong may have contributed something to the safety of other passengers and crew. For parents and friends of those on board, though, what happened that night is never far from their minds. Adrian DeVille's body was one of 22 that were never identified. Their remains were cremated together by the Russian authorities.
In mine, he was asleep, and that's the way I deal with it, and, you know, he didn't know much about it.
The crew of the Airbus are buried in Mitinskoye Cemetery in Moscow, in a hero's grave, next to the firefighters who died at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Yana and Eldar lie next to their father.
I can imagine the horror they experienced in their last moments. He knew there were not only all those people depending on him, but also his own kids.
Yes, it was a violation. Yes, he did it. But how it all happened, it was just a freak accident, a bizarre coincidence.
I can forgive the pilot. I can forgive the children because they were innocent. This man was 39 years old, and for those 39 years he had an exemplary flying career. He had a family, he was proud of them, and it was the final 5 minutes of those 39 years that went awry.
Yeah, children shouldn't have been allowed in the cockpit, I don't believe, but me saying that now won't bring Mark back, will it? But it might stop things happening in the future.
Morning rush hour, Charlotte, North Carolina. Its busy airport is rocked by a massive explosion.
The flames were coming over the fence, just total craziness. Everybody was just running for their lives.
Firefighters rush to one of the airport's main hangars. They confront an inferno.
It was quite a while before we realized a plane had hit the hangar.
A packed commuter flight has plunged to the ground shortly after takeoff. Everyone on board is killed.
We kept scratching our head wondering, okay, this airplane flew 9 times previously and we had no problems.
Investigators uncover a string of errors.
Bill, I have an idea.
And learn that passengers on small planes have actually been in danger for years. It's morning on January the 8th, 2003, in Charlotte, North Carolina. A city of 500,000 wakes. At Charlotte Douglas International Airport, commercial airline pilot Captain Katie Leslie is at work early. Only 25 years old, this Texas native has been flying for Air Midwest for almost 3 years. One of the youngest flight captains at her airline.
Hey, Tom. Have a great flight.
She's a top-rated pilot building her career at one of the fastest-growing airports in the United States. This airport is an important domestic hub for U.S. Airways, with flights to most major cities in the eastern United States. Air Midwest runs a commuter service as U.S. Airways Express. It operates a fleet of Beechcraft 1900D planes, a 19-passenger short-haul commuter plane, and a trusted workhorse in the industry. Today, Captain Leslie is in command of a 1900D on a 30-minute hop to Greenville-Spartanburg Airport in Greer, North Carolina. Her co-pilot is 27-year-old Jonathan Gibbs.
How'd you sleep last night?
Had a dream I was in Miami.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, this is the final boarding call for Air Midwest Flight 5481 to Greenville-Spartanburg. All passengers wishing to board should make their way to gate.
Among the passengers flying to Greer this morning, 18-year-old Christiana Shepard. Christiana's parents, Doug and Teresa, are Baptist missionaries working in the Portuguese Azores.
Christiana left the 7th of January from the Azores, spent the night in the airport in Boston, and then flew the next morning on the early flight from Boston to Charlotte to Greenville. So she was on her way back to college.
Christiana was very special, and she was one that would come up and give you a hug and say, you know, she'd come for no reason. She would give you a hug and say, Dad, I love you.
At 8 in the morning, Christiana boards her flight. Meanwhile, as part of their standard checklist before takeoff, the crew calculates the weight of all the baggage, passengers, and fuel on the plane. That's to make sure the plane isn't overweight, and the weight is spread evenly. It's a calculation that's made on all commercial aircraft.
So we got a full house back there?
You can count 19 people in the back. Don't know the bags yet.
Okay.
But baggage handlers raise concerns that the luggage they're loading may be too heavy.
Damn.
Captain, how many we gotta take off?
We're figuring it out.
off.
Cool. 17,018.
17,120 is our weight, huh?
Yeah, is our max.
So, we're cool.
So, yeah.
Good morning. Welcome aboard U.S. Airways Express service to Greenville, Spartanburg. It's a very short flight, maybe 30 minutes gate to gate, so sit back, relax, and we'll have you there in a few minutes.
Before takeoff, the crew checks the flight controls, including the rudder and elevator, which help control the direction of the plane.
Flight controls, free and correct.
Air Midwest 5481, runway 18 right.
Taxi into position and hold.
Captain Leslie is moments from takeoff. On the runway ahead of them is a Bombardier CRJ ready for departure.
That CRJ sure is a good-looking plane, isn't it?
Yeah, wish I was flying it.
With powerful turbulence released from the CRJ, Captain Leslie must keep a safe distance.
They're gonna blast us with his jet blasts.
Air Midwest 5481, turn right, heading 230. Cleared for takeoff.
Set takeoff power, please.
Power is set. 80 knots, cross-checked.
At 80 knots, pilots check that key instruments are working. With no signs of trouble, Leslie and Gibbs proceed with their takeoff. To air traffic control, Flight 5481's takeoff roll is perfectly normal.
Gear up.
What?
But without warning, the plane's nose pitches dramatically upward from 7 to a staggering 54 degrees.
Oh, help me! You got it?
The crew struggles to get the nose back down again. Airflow over the top of the wings creates lift. But if the nose keeps rising, air won't flow smoothly over the plane's wings. The plane will lose its lift, stall, and plunge from the sky.
Push the nose down! Oh my God! You have an emergency on Air Midwest 5481?
Alert 3 standby, runway 18 right.
The controller handling Flight 5481 calls for emergency equipment.
Oh my God.
The plane is now 350 meters from the ground. It stalls, rolls to the left, and begins falling from the sky. Captain Leslie pulls on her control column with all her might. If she can't get the plane to climb, she's going to hit the ground. Air traffic controllers watch as a 19-passenger plane plunges towards the Earth. Captain Katie Leslie struggles desperately to get her plane to climb, but it won't respond. The plane heads towards a packed U.S. Airways hangar. The flight was loaded with almost 1,000 kilograms of highly flammable jet fuel just before takeoff. The impact instantly ignites all that fuel. Now the intense fire threatens to engulf the hangar. There are several airplanes and hundreds of people working inside.
Fire station, emergency? Engine crash. It's the plane that's crashed. Yes, at the U.S. Air Maintenance Parade. Running towards the building, there's a fire. Code 10, aircraft crash. The south end of runway 36 left. I repeat, a confirmed aircraft crash, all fire.
38-year-old Fire Chief Keith Rogers is driving to work when he gets a Code 10 call.
Code 10 means that there's a confirmed plane crash. Usually, this type of call is a once-in-a-career type of incident.
Cindy Overcash is a firefighter with the Charlotte Fire Department.
You couldn't actually see the hangar from here, but you just saw a huge black plume of smoke. And we knew, something really bad is here.
In the adjacent building, sales director David Isola hears the explosion.
Well, I was sitting at my desk, and I heard this loud boom. And one of the guys came in from next door and said that he just saw an airplane crash. And so I hopped in my truck and drove down to the site.
From 60 meters away, Isola records the opening moments of the tragedy.
There was a lot of smoke, and it was just like hell. It looked just like hell. The flames were coming over the fence, just total craziness. Everybody was just running for their lives.
When Chief Keith Rogers arrives at the scene, he finds himself swimming upstream against a mob in panic.
As I got onto the airport property and got onto the tarmac, the people were exiting the hangar. Those people were running out in front of the fire trucks, the fire cars, so we had to drive with caution. They were getting out of the building as fast as they could, because I think they definitely realized that this was not a drill, this was a real emergency.
And we still weren't sure if we had a plane inside the hangar that had caught on fire, or if the hangar had caught on fire. It was quite a while before we realized a plane had hit the hangar.
Chief Rogers immediately takes command of the scene. He knows that there are aircraft parked inside the flaming hangar. Their fuel tanks threaten to blow.
And our concern was, one, about the people that were on board the aircraft, two, for the people that were working in the hangar, and three, we had to worry about the airplanes that were in for repair. Were those aircraft on fire? So we had a lot of major issues to deal with.
Within minutes, firefighters begin to get the inferno under control. The hope now is that somewhere inside the wreck, survivors are clinging to life.
The main thing probably was on anybody's mind once we realized what we had was survivors.
Chief Rogers sends a line of firefighters led by Cindy Overcash into the heart of the inferno. Cindy Overcash and two of her team make their way into the wreckage, carefully putting out spot fires along the way.
As we walk up on to see the fire and we see what we think are crash test dummies, we thought a plane had blown up inside and blew their training dummies out. And then it dawned on me, that's not a training dummy.
It took them a few minutes to determine exactly what was happening, and once they did that, it was obvious that there were no survivors.
It's a total loss. All 19 passengers, as well as Captain Leslie and First Officer Gibbs, are dead.
At about 8:53 this morning, we had an aircraft accident. It had 19 passengers and 2 crew. There are no survivors.
And we hope that we never have to respond to a situation with such a large loss of life, but that is our job. This is some of the most difficult duty and tasks that a firefighter will ever do in their career.
For medics and rescue workers, the ordeal is over. But for friends and family of the victims, the anguish has just begun.
I was walking through the living room, and I stopped and said, my heart's beating right now just the way it was then, said, "Has Christiana called yet?" She said, "No." Okay, and I knew then what had happened. I knew. So I went and got the telephone and called the school. He said, "Yes, Mrs. Shepard, we have some sad news." And he told me that the plane had crashed on takeoff. I asked if there were any survivors. He said no. So then I knew I had to go tell Doug, and he was in the garage.
Yeah, it's something you never forget about. I was changing a fluorescent bulb, and Teresa came to the doorway.
How do you say that? You use words every single day. How can you use words to ruin someone's life? But I told him, I said, "Doug, Christiana's plane crashed."
At that moment, my world fell apart.
Now the Shepards and the families of the other 20 victims want to know what caused the deaths of their loved ones. It's been almost 5 hours since Flight 5481 crashed into a hangar in Charlotte, North Carolina. With no survivors to rescue, neither bodies nor airplane parts are moved from where they fell until the arrival of investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board. While medical examiners mark the location of human remains in red, NTSB investigators mark scraps of metal in yellow, looking for clues to help them figure out what happened aboard Flight 5481. Among those assigned to this case, lead investigator Lorinda Ward. This is her first assignment as the lead investigator of a crash. But today, she's not feeling her best.
That day, I was a little bit under the weather. I was fighting off a cold. You have the adrenaline that shoots through your body at the time, and so that actually makes up for when you're not feeling well. And I knew that the other people on my team were experienced, so I felt comfortable going to Charlotte.
At Charlotte Douglas Airport, Ward takes the first steps towards solving this accident.
I checked in with the fire department to make sure that the fires had been put out, and then called a meeting with all the first responders to see what they had noticed when they came to the crash site.
Ward acts fast. Because there are bodies entangled with the wreckage, she declares the crash site a potential biohazard. Investigators who might come in contact with the wreckage must wear protective suits while they examine the wreck and identify the victims' remains.
When we arrived on scene, the accident site did not look like an airplane was there. Due to the fire, the post-crash fire, when you initially walked up to it, it was hard to identify that you had an airplane that could hold 21 people.
While work continues at the crash site,
All right, let's go.
Lorinda Ward and her team look for clues nearby.
We had the folks go shoulder to shoulder on the runway that the accident crew took off on to pick up anything that they saw on the runway to see if it had any relevance to the accident investigation.
Runways must be clear of all debris. The smallest object can become a deadly projectile if it strikes a plane on takeoff. 3 years earlier, a Concorde jet ran over a 40-centimeter strip of scrap metal on a Paris runway. The plane's fuel tank was pierced and caught fire. The aircraft rose to 200 meters before it crashed into a nearby hotel. 109 people on board and 4 people on the ground were killed. At Charlotte Douglas International, investigators scour the area. They find a fuel cap lying dangerously close to the runway.
What do we got?
It could be sucked in and it could damage an engine. The main part would be the damage that it could do to an engine.
The discovery raises an interesting possibility. As Flight 5481 raced down the runway at takeoff, the fuel cap bounced up off the tarmac, struck the engine rotors, and brought Captain Leslie's aircraft crashing to Earth.
This was to be brought back to see if it had any relevance to the accident investigation, whether it came off the airplane itself or if it could have done some type of damage to the airplane.
A closer examination leads Ward and her team to conclude that the fuel cap could not have interfered with the propellers. Investigators discover no other relevant debris on the runway. The runway debris theory is ruled out. Now, NTSB Air Traffic Control investigator Bill English explores another scenario.
When we first heard about the accident, it looked like there might be the possibility that we'd want to look at a wake turbulence encounter.
The wings of a fast-moving jet disturb the air around them, creating a trail of violently swirling air. NASA tests decades earlier had illustrated the power and danger of wake turbulence to other planes.
We had to see, did another airplane depart before it? That's where wake turbulence hazard would come from. And we wanted to look at what kind of airplane departed ahead of it. Larger, heavier airplanes are the more risky wake turbulence creating airplanes.
Bill English examines radar records from the time of the accident. He learns that a much heavier Bombardier regional jet, a CRJ, took off moments before the beach.
The CRJ sure is a good-looking plane, isn't it?
Yeah, wish I was flying it.
The wake turbulence is generated from the wingtips of any airplane. As soon as it starts to lift off the ground, it makes what people sometimes call horizontal tornadoes, vortexes of air that can create hazardous turbulence.
Runway 18 right. Taxi into position.
Air traffic controllers do have standard procedures for spacing out airplanes so that they have a chance to avoid the wake turbulence or let the wake dissipate.
1 year earlier, an American Airlines jet taking off from New York encountered wake turbulence. The plane crashed into a residential neighborhood. 260 people on the plane and 5 people on the ground were killed.
You're gonna blast us with his jet blasts.
Air Midwest 5481, cleared for takeoff.
Air traffic investigator Bill English must now determine if wake turbulence from the CRJ caused Flight 5481 to crash. Bill English studies the flight path of Captain Leslie's plane and finds it consistent with a plane flying into wake turbulence.
A pitch up is not unheard of in a wake turbulence encounter where the airplane will suddenly go nose up and the crew has trouble to counter that and get the nose back where it belongs.
English needs to know how close the Air Midwest flight got to the larger jet. The Charlotte Tower has a sophisticated computer system that tracks the movement of planes while they're still on the ground. The system gave Bill English his answer.
That system had a very rapid update, so we could see exactly where on the runway and at what time the regional jet lifted off compared to when the accident airplane started its roll.
When Bill English plots the precise position of the planes at liftoff, he makes a telling discovery. Even though both planes used the same runway, their paths never crossed.
The RJ started lifting off much farther down the runway than the accident airplane did, and the climb-out angle of the regional jet and the climb-out angle of the accident airplane never intersected. The angle of the accident airplane was very steep. It really had no possibility of intersecting the wake turbulence from the regional jet. So if our airplane lifted off and climbed above the angle of the previous airplane, we knew then that it couldn't possibly be a factor.
The wake vortex theory is ruled out, and Bill English's work is done. Now it's up to Ward and her crew to find clues in the burnt-out wreckage of the plane. Within 2 days, her investigation will reveal a string of errors and faulty assumptions that has been putting tens of thousands of passengers at risk for years. Within hours of the crash, investigators find the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder from Air Midwest Flight 5481. The recorders are designed to withstand temperatures of up to 1100 degrees Celsius. In this crash, parts of the voice recorder had actually melted. The devices are photographed and sent for analysis. Then, amongst the tons of debris on the ground, investigators discover the shredded remains of the elevator control cables. Vital to flight control, these cables link the pilot's control columns to the flight elevator, an aerodynamic panel that helps pilots climb and descend. Turnbuckles keep the cables taut. To climb, pilots pull on the column. The cables pull the elevator up, forcing the nose to rise. To descend, pilots push on the control column. The cables tilt the elevator down, and the nose falls. But as investigators examined the burnt-out cables and turnbuckles on Captain Leslie's plane, already something looks wrong.
They looked unusual. They weren't in like the normal position that you would find them. In this case, we had one adjusted all the way out and then one adjusted all the way in. So those were set aside for us to look at later.
While the lab work continues, NTSB investigator Stephen Carbone travels to Huntington, Virginia. He interviews mechanics who worked on the plane the day before the crash.
At the time, we had known that it had just come out of a detail check, which is a routine check. And knowing that, we were looking into the possibility that something had been done during the check that needed to be looked at from an investigation point of view.
The cables needed servicing. My guy wrote up a service order, and I put him on it. Don't forget the manual.
Got it.
Every 1,200 flight hours, Air Midwest planes go in for routine maintenance work. This includes adjusting the cables that control the plane's elevator.
In the process of doing this check, he found that the mechanic had found that the cables were out of limits. So he had written up that he was going to check the cable tensions and then adjust them as per the manual.
Everything's right.
The mechanics tell Carbone that the work was checked and stamped for quality assurance.
They believed that the aircraft was properly rigged as per the manual.
At first glance, that belief appears to be right. After maintenance, this Beech aircraft took off and landed 9 times without incident before Captain Leslie took the helm. Investigators turned to the flight data recorder to learn what happened on those flights. The flight data recorder stores data from numerous flights, both before and after the plane's cables were adjusted. No one on any of those flights had encountered any problems with the plane's elevator.
So at the time, we didn't know how that affected the airplane because it had flown 9 times successfully before the accident flight.
Ward also discovers that the crew tested their elevator controls before Flight 5481 took off.
Flight controls, free and correct.
Air Midwest 5481.
Ward and her team dig deeper, looking to discover if the unusual configuration of the elevator cables could have played a role in this crash. What they find strikes at the very heart of what went wrong. Normally, both turnbuckles are almost exactly the same length. But on Captain Leslie's plane, one turnbuckle is noticeably longer than the other. To establish the correct cable tension, mechanics tighten the turnbuckles. But too much tightening of a turnbuckle shortens the cables and cuts the range of motion of the elevator control. The elevator should be able to tilt to a nose-down position of 14 degrees. But their downward range has actually been cut in half to only 7 degrees. The result is deadly. As the flight got underway, the nose pitched up as expected during takeoff.
What?
Push the nose down! Oh my God!
But the reduced range in the elevator made it impossible for the pilots to bring the nose down again.
Due to the adjustment that had been done in the maintenance a few nights earlier, there was nothing that the crew could have done at that time.
Unable to bring the nose down, the pitch of the wings became too pronounced. With no air flowing over the top of the wings, the plane lost its lift and began falling from the sky. The pilot's struggle with the elevator helps explain why Flight 5481 crashed that day. Somehow, the elevator cables were improperly adjusted. The pilots simply could not control the pitch of their airplane. Stephen Carbone wants to know how mechanics had made such a critical mistake.
Yeah, I see that here.
He goes back to the hangar to question the mechanics on duty that night. And this time, they tell him a different story.
Most of the guys were just learning the ropes.
The mechanics working on the airline were subcontractors to the contract company. And the mechanics working on the aircraft that night had limited experience on the Beech 1900D. And the person performing the rig was receiving training that night on that specific task.
Once you have the rig pin set, adjust the turnbuckle barrels for more tension in the cable.
Yeah, I see that here.
Adjusting the elevator cables is not a simple process. It's a time-consuming procedure that involves 25 different steps.
Got it. What about the other steps?
Yeah, don't worry about those. Just check the cable tension when you're done, and we're good. That's it.
The quality assurance inspector and the mechanic took it upon themselves to decide which steps to perform because they felt that the steps they were performing were the only ones necessary to get the task done.
The mechanic skipped 9 steps that night. One of those involved manipulating the elevator through its full range of motion. Had the mechanic tried to do that, he would have noticed that the elevator's motion was restricted by cables that had been improperly rigged.
If they had followed the steps as described in the manual, they would have found the problems that had come up.
But there was an inspector supervising the work. Carbone discovers that the inspector was actually the person teaching the mechanics how to do the work.
The problem was that the quality assurance inspector was actually acting as an instructor. So he was taking the mechanic through the process of the job task and teaching him how to do the rig. Well, when you put yourself in that position, you're actually doing the task because even as a teacher, you're performing the task. And then he came in behind himself and then signed off as an inspector what he had done.
Well, I found out that this mechanic had skipped procedures. I was upset. The procedures that affected our lives, that affected the lives of 21 people, 21 families were destroyed. Because you never get over something like this.
The Shepherds sue the airline. They also demand something unheard of in U.S. aviation, an apology.
They wanted more than just to achieve a just settlement in monetary terms. They had a need to press the issues that humanize and put a face on the people who are the victims of these tragedies.
The Shepherds believe that their best chance of getting an apology is by putting a face to Christiana's name.
So we decided to take this picture and to send it to those people that were involved in the accident, in the investigation, so that Christiana would not be just a number or a seat number or a ticket number or a settlement amount, so that they could actually see that she was a person.
The legal journey began when we determined that we wanted the apology, that we wanted someone to say, we really blew this. We assumed the airline would apologize. We had no idea that airlines don't apologize. If they did something wrong, obviously you should stand up and say, we are so sorry that we messed up in this and we're fixing this.
In this case, the mechanics thought they were doing something that was perfectly reasonable. They thought this was, another day at the job. And then to come to find out that now 21 people have been, killed due to their inadvertent act.
For Lorinda Ward and her team, it looks like they've found the problem. But something still doesn't add up. Why didn't the problem with the plane's faulty rigging surface on any of its previous flights?
We kept scratching our head wondering, okay, this airplane flew 9 times previously and we had no problems. So we're trying to decide, well, what was unusual about this flight?
Ward has to figure out what happened in the hours and minutes before the crash.
And did you notice anything unusual before takeoff?
Well, it was sitting low when it taxied out. It looked heavy.
We had a couple of witnesses that were implying that we had a very heavily loaded airplane. The baggage people said that it was hard to shut the door because they thought bags were going to come out.
Each plane has a maximum weight it can handle before the engines can't get it off the ground. Before takeoff, it's the pilot's job to calculate the onboard weight.
We got a full house back there?
How many we gotta take off?
We're figuring it out.
The crew of Flight 5481 did perform that calculation.
Cool, 17018.
We heard them on the CVR going through the numbers to make sure that they'd have their center of gravity within the range for them to take off.
17120 is our weight, huh?
Yeah, is our max.
On any plane, large or small, the weight of cargo and passengers has to be distributed evenly. The balancing point of an airplane is called its center of gravity. For a plane to fly safely, it can neither be too far forward nor too far back or aft.
So, we're cool.
So, yeah.
We don't think we're gonna have to take anything off.
Air Midwest pilots are instructed how to make weight and center of gravity, or CG, calculations. They use average weights to make that calculation, 175 pounds per passenger and 20 pounds per bag.
They knew that they had a very aft CG, but due to using the average weights and average calculations, the paperwork showed them being within the range that they needed to take off.
But Ward needs to know if the plane really was within the proper range of weight and balance to take off.
What we did is we looked at the weights of the actual baggage itself that was on board and then the weight of the passengers and the crew.
Technicians weigh the remains of the burnt luggage from the wreckage site.
Doctor, yes, could you tell me, please, what the last recorded weight of your patient is, please?
And obtain the real weight of passengers on board that day.
212. Thank you.
When all the numbers are in, Ward discovers the real weight of Flight 5481 is 17,700 pounds, some 580 pounds over its maximum takeoff weight.
They would not have been able to take off if they had used actual weights. They would have had to pull either passengers or bags off.
Because of the higher than expected weight of the passengers and baggage on the flight, and the large number of bags stowed in the rear, the airplane was tail-heavy. Its center of gravity ever so slightly too far to the rear, which wasn't a problem until the landing gear was raised.
Gear up.
When the gear's weight moved backwards from the nose, it tipped the balance of weight too far back. The pilot's efforts to regain control of the aircraft were futile, crippled by the airplane's defective elevator controls.
When the nose gear moved aft, they lost the ability to control the aircraft because all the weight went back and they had no elevator movement enough to bring the nose back down. And at the height that they were at, they had no recovery.
The passengers and crew of Flight 5481 were doomed the moment the plane left the ground. They had no way of knowing that two unrelated problems would combine to bring down their plane.
This was just a normal routine flight for them, and they did all the pre-flight checks, they did their weight and balance, they did the correct calls, they're on the right runway. It was just another day at the job, and they didn't know that they had these two hidden, latent failures that were waiting for them.
But faulty maintenance and above-average weights weren't the only issues uncovered by Lorinda Ward's investigation.
Hey, you got a sec? I have an idea.
Lorinda Ward suspects she's uncovered problems that didn't just affect this one flight, but that also affected every commuter plane in the air. NTSB investigators say that every plane crash makes flying safer. Flight 5481 was no exception. 14 months after the accident, lead investigator Lorinda Ward and her team file a comprehensive report to ensure the mistakes that killed those aboard Flight 5481 are never repeated. Among Ward's recommendations, that the FAA review its average passenger and baggage weights, an average that had not been revised since 1936. And since studies suggest that Americans and other adults were getting heavier from year to year, Ward suspected that the averages were off.
We made a recommendation to the FAA to have the operators go out and survey their operations both summer and winter time to see how accurate these average weights reflected the actual flying public that was getting onto their airplanes.
After conducting a survey of passengers, the FAA comes to a shocking conclusion. The average weight of adult American passengers was 195 pounds, not 175. The FAA also discovered that the average weight of carry-on luggage was being underestimated by 5 pounds per bag.
We had an average weight that were being used that needed to be updated.
Had these higher average weights been in effect on January the 8th, 2003, Flight 5481 would not have been legal for takeoff. Captain Leslie would have had to remove bags and passengers.
48107, cool, 17018.
Air Midwest pilots now use an average weight of 200 pounds per passenger, which means that their Beechcraft planes can only carry 17 passengers, not 19. But Ward's report goes on to say that even with updated industry averages, there's still room for error. Her report states that flying small aircraft will be safest only when airlines stop using average weight assumptions altogether and calculate the real weight on board before takeoff. New technologies are being developed to allow air carriers to measure actual weight and control balance in real time as the plane is loaded. Knowing the actual weight of passengers and baggage is vital. More and more people are flying on small commuter jets. As the cost of jet fuel soars, the smaller fuel-efficient planes become more attractive to airlines. In the United States alone, more than 10 million people a year board planes with fewer than 30 seats.
Smaller aircraft are more sensitive to the weight and balance issue than, say, a larger airplane.
In spite of Ward's recommendations and the available technology, almost 70% of small planes on scheduled flights still use average instead of actual weights. For Doug and Teresa Shepard, there is still another danger that threatens to strike again.
If the FAA took a very active role in their regulation, then subcontracting could actually be a plus. The way it's handled today, the mistakes will just continue.
What about the other steps?
Yeah, don't worry about those. Just check the cable tension when you're done, and we're good.
In her report, Ward states that all air carriers need to provide direct oversight to make sure that even subcontracted work is completed correctly.
This investigation was unique to me personally because it was my first launch as an investigator in charge. This was, in my mind, a significant investigation in the fact that we had the 22 safety recommendations that came out from a small accident investigation.
For the Shepards, the NTSB recommendations come too late. But after a lengthy legal battle, Air Midwest does deliver a rare and formal apology for the mistakes that cost 18-year-old Christiana Shepard her life.
My name is Ron Goldman, and my role here today is I will be introducing the public apology, and then I'll have a few words. The public apology is, in aviation cases, unprecedented.
We are here today to remember the victims of Flight 5481 and to offer our apologies, our condolences, and sincere sympathy to the surviving family members of the passengers and crew who perished in the January 8, 2003 crash of Air Midwest Flight number 5481.
The acceptance of accountability suggests that the recommendations made by the safety investigators are not to be taken as a book to throw in a drawer and forget about, but are to be taken seriously, because if you don't take them seriously, there's going to be public accountability as well as private accountability.
What people should never forget is that as we're going about and doing our job day to day, we need to remember the importance of doing our job. Doesn't matter where we're at on the ladder or the corporate ladder, whether we're at the bottom rung or the top rung, we have responsibilities.
It took a complicated string of errors and miscalculations to bring down Flight 5481. But some believe there was one person who performed admirably that day: Captain Katie Leslie. With an unbalanced plane and faulty controls, Captain Leslie could not have saved the flight. But her final actions may have saved some lives.
You know, she's an unsung hero to me because I don't think many people know about what she did and how she was fighting it and trying to pull the plane away from the hangar. And she actually did. She kept it from really more of a head-on hit into the hangar. Which probably saved countless other people from perishing that day.
It was firefighter Cindy Overcash who found the body of Captain Katie Leslie among the wreckage. To this day, Overcash still feels a special connection to the young pilot.
I don't know, I just felt a kinship. I don't know why. I don't know, you know, it could be as simple as I found her. And I was there when she left this world. I don't know, but I thought about her a lot.
Lorinda Ward's investigation could have ended when she uncovered the errors that caused the crash of Flight 5481. By digging a bit deeper, she made flying safer for millions of people.
takeoff checklist complete.
US Airways Flight 1549 has just left New York's LaGuardia Airport.
Birds.
And that fast, we were just on top of them.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Both of the plane's engines have stopped working.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549.
The plane is falling from the sky. There are only a few seconds to decide what to do.
If we can get it for you, you want to try and land on runway 13.
We're unable.
155 lives depend on the pilots making the right call.
Hey, Cactus 1549, you can land runway 1 at Peterborough.
Can't do it.
With a bad option on the right and a worse one on the left, the crew decides to put their Airbus on the runway that's dead ahead.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
Mayday, Mayday.
New York's LaGuardia Airport, mid-afternoon.
Please take a moment to listen to this important...
US Airways Flight 1549 is a short hop from New York City to Charlotte, North Carolina.
At least it will be a little warmer in Charlotte.
Your seat serves as flotation device.
Together in the cockpit today are Captain Chesley Sullenberger, 57.
Clear to push.
And First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, 49.
We were late because the weather was bad earlier, but by this point, the weather cleared off for our departure, and it was just puffy clouds.
28 brakes released.
Spot 28 for Cactus 1549.
150 passengers are on board the European-made Airbus A320. Businessman Clay Presley is on his way home to Charlotte.
I arrived at the airport at LaGuardia. It was very cold. It had been snowing a little bit that day, and we had a storm coming in, so we wanted to make sure we made that flight and weren't hung up or delayed on some later flights.
The crew flew in an hour earlier from Charlotte, with Sullenberger at the controls.
Your brakes, your aircraft.
First Officer Skiles will be flying the plane back to Charlotte.
My aircraft.
It's a common sharing of piloting duties.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
This trip marks the final leg of a 4-day sequence of flights for both men.
We made our standard call-outs. It was just a normal takeoff, normal procedures on the climb out. There was absolutely nothing at all to indicate that this would be any different than any other takeoff in my entire career.
But by the end of the day, they'll be the most famous crew on the planet.
Gear up, please.
Gear up.
Patrick Harton is one of the controllers handling traffic out of LaGuardia today. He has one of the most stressful jobs in the world.
When I sit down in front of a radar, I'm responsible for every person on every airplane under my control. And I take that responsibility very seriously.
Cactus 1549, New York departure, radar contact. Climb and maintain 15,000.
The flight will climb northeast out of LaGuardia, and then begin a slow turn south towards Charlotte.
I think I had about 3 or 4 airplanes on my frequency at that time. And it was just a normal departure. You know, it was just another flight that I've handled a million times.
Riding the thrust of 2 General Electric engines, the aircraft powers into the sky.
Cactus 1549, 700, climbing 5,000. What a view of the Hudson today.
Yeah.
After takeoff checklist complete.
Flight 1549 is traveling at almost 400 kilometers an hour. It's been in the air for just a minute and a half.
I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and slightly to our right, but still ahead of us, was a line of birds. And they were very, very close, too close for us to maneuver around. And that fast, we were just on top of them.
You can just feel the power of the plane going forward. And then all of a sudden, there was this gigantic boom. It seemed like it stopped in midair, like you hit a brick wall. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, "The left engine's on fire."
Uh-oh. Before we could even assess the situation,
We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
both engines rolled back to idle.
Ignition start.
Just 13 seconds after their problems began, Sullenberger takes control of the struggling plane.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH. Loss of thrust in both engines.
The QRH, or Quick Reference Handbook, is a step-by-step guide to dealing with emergencies.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds. We've lost thrust in both engines. We're turning back towards LaGuardia.
When a pilot says Mayday or declares an emergency, you go from a focus state to a hyper-focus state. You just focus in on the emergency itself and, figure out the solution to the problem.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left, heading 220.
220.
All of a sudden, there was a smell that came through the cabin.
Something's burning.
If fuel remaining, engine mode selector, ignition.
What I'm thinking, though, at this point is that, we're just going to have to restart an engine.
Thrust levers. Confirm idle.
Idle.
The procedure is to try to restart the engines, and I always had faith we could do that.
Airspeed optimum relay, 300 knots. We don't have that.
We don't.
Okay, Cactus 1549, if we can get it for you, you want to try and land on runway 13.
We're unable.
The conversations with Captain Sullenberger were very short and to the point, which was very appropriate for the emergency. There was a lot going on and wasn't much time to handle it. When Captain Sullenberger simply said unable, it didn't bother me. I mean, he had his hands full flying the airplane, and I understood that. So my job is just to move on to the next option.
All right, Cactus 1549, it's going to be traffic for runway 31.
Unable.
Hardin still wants the jet to return to LaGuardia, but Flight 1549 is now just 1,400 feet above the ground.
Cactus 1549, runway 4 is available if you want to make left, traffic runway 4.
I'm not sure we can make any runway. What's to our right? Anything in New Jersey? Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off to your right side is Teterboro Airport. You want to try to go to Teterboro?
Teterboro is a small airport on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River, but it's several kilometers away. And without their engines, Flight 1549 is dropping fast.
Want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
When the air traffic controller pointed out Teterboro, I looked at it and I stopped, and I was kind of concerned that he was actually going to try for it. I didn't think we could make it.
So you're sitting there very quietly. People are anxiously waiting for information, and they wanted reassurance that things were going to be okay. You could hear the microphone come on.
This is the captain.
We're hoping he was going to say, "I've got this under control, we're going to be okay, we're going to make it, we're going to turn around and go back and land." That's what you were hoping to hear.
Brace for impact.
What does he mean, brace for impact? And then all of a sudden it registered. I think he's saying we're going to crash.
Get your heads down!
I had no idea about how to brace for impact. Everybody's looking around, brace for impact. What do you mean, brace for impact? And how do you brace?
Go ahead. Try number 1.
I put it back on.
Okay, put it back on. Put it back on.
While the crew struggles to fly their stricken plane, Patrick Hardin is still trying to find them an airport.
I actually worked Teterboro Airport for about 3 years, so I was very familiar with the airport.
Okay, Cactus 1549, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
Can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
I could hear him, but my mind really didn't want to comprehend those words.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
That was a death sentence for him, and I didn't want to accept the fact that it was over and there were no more options left.
I don't think we're going back to LaGuardia.
I just emailed my wife and just said, "I love you." And I didn't say anything else because I really did not want her to worry.
Okay. Let's go. Put the flaps out.
I thought to myself, great, the Hudson River was our best opportunity. It was really the only thing in sight where we could land this airplane.
Passengers throughout the plane watch the Hudson rise to meet them and begin making preparations of their own.
So I started thinking about, if we're going to crash, I know I need to figure out where the exit rows are. If the water comes in, you need to be able to hold your breath long enough to get to those 4 or 5 rows and get the doors open if you can.
Got flaps out, 250 feet in the air.
We're not going to be able to get an engine started, so I started calling out airspeeds and altitudes.
170 knots.
To give him a situational awareness of what was going on.
Got flaps 2. A little more.
No, let's stay at 2. Got any ideas?
Actually, not.
I was so focused on what we were doing, and I always thought it would work out.
Below 300 feet, Patrick Harton's radar can't see the plane. Flight 1549 disappears.
When the aircraft disappeared off my radar, I just assumed that there weren't going to be any survivors.
In the cabin, the passengers prepare for the inevitable.
All the passengers really started kind of pulling together, and somebody yelled out as we were going down,
"You ready at the doors?"
The folks at the door says, "We're ready." I was just scared to death.
We're going to brace.
Looked like the airplane was going right for the bottom of the Hudson River. All we saw was water cascading over the windshield.
It was like a tornado. Pieces of the plane were being torn apart. Some people were thrown around pretty good.
Then the airplane popped up, and it was just sort of gently rocking in the waves.
We all just sat there. We were all in shock, and we were waiting for what's next.
US Airways Flight 1549 was in the air for just 5 minutes and 8 seconds. Having made a remarkable landing, the passengers and crew now face a new danger. The plane is leaking. The ice-cold water of the Hudson is pouring into the cabin. The crew of Flight 1549 has just performed an extremely difficult aviation feat, but they still have more work to do. Captain Sullenberger heads for the cabin, while First Officer Skiles shuts down the plane.
I stayed behind and did the evacuation checklist, and so it was probably about 45 seconds before I actually went back myself in the cabin after we landed.
In an instant, the $75 million plane has become an unlikely boat floating down the Hudson River. It's now filling with freezing water.
That water was cold. It was very cold, so your feet are freezing. People came to their senses and they said, "Get the doors open, get the doors open."
At air traffic control, Patrick Harton has no idea the plane even made it down safely.
I didn't think anyone could survive a water landing like that. They got me off position because I was obviously in no condition to work traffic anymore.
Harton is led to his union office. Despite his ordeal, protocol demands he recount his version of events.
I really didn't want to speak to anyone. I just wanted to kind of hide under a rock. I needed my wife to know what had happened, but I knew I couldn't talk to her because I was pretty much in a fragile state and I didn't want to break down. So I sent her a simple text message. I said, "Had a crash, I'm not okay, can't talk now."
Passengers nearest the exits open the doors quickly, while Sullenberger and the cabin crew begin managing the evacuation.
I just jumped up very quickly and started making my way to the emergency door. And so I worked my way out onto the wing, just a few steps to start with. I started noticing that people around me had their flotation devices. They'd pulled up their seat bottoms, or they had a life jacket that they'd taken. I had nothing with me.
Skiles heads back to help the crew in the cabin get passengers out of the sinking plane. He knows there's not much time, and one of the flight attendants has been injured.
I went back to about mid-cabin, and Sully and I and two young men were getting seat cushions and life vests, which are underneath the seats, and we're passing them out.
And I'm looking around trying to assess the situation. Is the plane going to blow up? What's the next step? Yeah, there were actually probably 6 or 8 people that went into the water. And they were shivering and they were cold. We started pulling them back up onto the wing.
At the back of the plane, water continues pouring in. Passengers are directed to move forward to escape.
Go over the seats if you have to.
This unwieldy boat won't be floating much longer.
We were actually in the water, up to our knees, and it was just absolutely freezing cold. Every part of your body that was in that water just ached to the bone.
Come forward! Is there anybody here?
We were very confident there was nobody left on the airplane, but what was going on the wings, we just had no idea.
Skiles and Sullenberger are the last ones off the plane.
I just saw the big splash when the plane just bounced over the water.
A small commercial airline crashed into the water.
They've been in the water more than 10 minutes already.
LaGuardia Airport has sent out an alert to New York's emergency services. In the middle of the Hudson, 155 frozen people hope that help will arrive in time.
I saw the first ferry, and I could see the wheelhouse. I felt like, okay, we're really going to be okay. There was a sigh of relief.
First on the scene are passenger ferries that have been shuttling people across the Hudson. They are eventually joined by the Coast Guard and fire department.
The atmosphere on the ferry was still one of concern because we didn't know whether all the passengers got off the plane at that point in time.
I was sitting in the union office preparing to make my statement.
Where do I start?
And that's when one of my friends popped their head into the office and said, "Hey, Patty, it looks like everyone made it." And I was like, "Really?" That was incredible news. I mean, I was still traumatized by the event itself, but the fact that everyone made it was just, it's like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders.
The entire nation looks on as every single passenger and the entire crew of Flight 1549 is brought to safety.
Are you okay?
Like so many others around the world, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are riveted to the pictures.
Hey, you gotta see this.
We learned a little bit about the accident, of course, before we launched. The TV channels were showing the aircraft in the river and everything.
All agree that the landing is extraordinary.
I think it was a miracle, and very blessed to have walked away. I reached over to Captain Sully and just said, "I just want you to know you saved my life and everyone's lives here."
In my mind, we were dead, and every one of us came out of that alive. It's a miracle.
By evening, the plane is almost completely underwater. The current is pushing it towards the edge of the river.
The aircraft was tied up against the pier, and we went down to look at it to see what we were up against, of course. But we can't do much at night.
NTSB investigator Harold Reichel arrives on the scene.
The water was dark, of course. We just saw the tail and most of the fuselage, and one of the wings was underneath the water.
We knew it was going to be quite difficult to get it, A, out of the water, and then B, to a place where we could examine the components of the airplane in a more controlled manner.
For investigators, it's an unusual situation. Normally, their main task is to uncover the cause of a crash. With Flight 1549, the cause seems obvious.
Birds.
The original Mayday call was clear.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds. We've lost thrust in both engines. We're turning back towards LaGuardia. Okay, you need to come back.
The crew reported that they hit several birds shortly after takeoff.
I think everybody realized that a bird strike had occurred. What people didn't know was what kind of birds brought the aircraft down, whether it might have been a combination of a bird strike plus something else, whether the crew acted and flew the aircraft as they should have.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH.
U.S. Airways pilot made an incredibly skillful emergency landing in the Hudson River.
Investigators want to interview both pilots, but their sudden fame makes them hard to get to.
It became a little bit more difficult than usual to A, locate the flight crew, and then B, to talk to them. They were instant heroes.
Nothing in life can prepare one for the media frenzy of a situation, like this.
And it's not just the pilot's newfound celebrity that's an obstacle for investigators like Catherine Wilson.
One of the most challenging things in this case was nobody wanted to sully Sully. He was a hero in this case, and we were the ones who was potentially going to pick apart what he did and try to find out what he did and whether it was right or not.
To prove that birds caused the crash, authorities need to get the plane out of the water. But a vital piece is missing.
We've been told earlier that both engines were still attached to the aircraft. That turned out not to be true. So that became a major goal right off the bat, was to figure out where that second engine was. We didn't know exactly where it was.
Let's focus on this area.
But we had films of the aircraft actually touching down, and we could cross-reference different things. We used some side-scanning sonar that gave us a very clear picture of the bottom.
It wasn't that easy to do because the Hudson River has a current, and the current changes throughout the day. So it took 3 days, ultimately, to find the engine.
Within days, the recovered engine and the rest of the aircraft are moved to a warehouse in New Jersey, so investigators can study the wreckage more carefully.
We certainly couldn't do it out there at the edge of the Hudson River, and you can imagine how interesting it was to take an airplane 150 or 200 feet long through a very, very populated area in New Jersey.
As the plane is being moved, investigators work with the voice and data recorders.
Okay, let's hear it.
Which were in the most damaged part of the plane, the tail.
The cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder were in virtually pristine shape. The aircraft had sustained quite a bit of damage in the rear end, but the recorders themselves survived very well.
We were really lucky. All of the data was able to be downloaded normally.
We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
Listening to the CVR provides vital insight into how the crew responded to the emergency.
In this case, both Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles acted extremely professionally.
Ignition start.
Each member had their own roles and responsibilities. They stayed with those roles and responsibilities throughout the accident flight and communicated only when necessary.
Put the flaps up.
On Flight 1549,
My aircraft.
it took just seconds for the crew to each assume their individual responsibilities. Part of the reason they handled the emergency so well was that Jeffrey Skiles had only just finished his Airbus training.
This was my first trip out as a regular line pilot in the Airbus A320. It literally was right out of training.
And the benefit of that was that he knew exactly the checklist to turn to, and that's exactly what he did.
If you're remaining, engine mode selector, ignition.
Crews are highly trained in emergency procedures, and the main thing is to follow procedures in this instance, and that's exactly what First Officer Skiles did by grabbing the quick reference handbook and turning to the appropriate checklist.
But as investigators examine the checklist for restarting this plane's engines, they make a troubling discovery.
It was assembled for an event that occurred 20,000 feet in the air, where a crew would have plenty of time to slowly and carefully go through a 3-page checklist, the end of which was, how do we ditch the airplane?
So it was a 3-page checklist, and really, I only got to about the page and a half through this checklist in the time that we had.
airspeed optimum relay.
The crew spent a lot of time trying to restart the engines when they could have been focusing on preparing the airplane for the ditching.
300 knots. You don't have that.
We don't.
Overly complicated checklists have played a role in deadly plane crashes in the past. In 1998, a fire broke out on board a Swissair passenger jet. The checklist the crew used for that situation would have taken them up to half an hour to complete. It's a half hour they didn't have. But on Flight 1549, the checklist was far from the greatest challenge facing Sullenberger and Skiles.
I'm not sure we can make any runway.
Water landings are notoriously difficult because unless they're perfect, they can be catastrophic. In 1996, after a hijacking, an Ethiopian Airlines captain tried to land off the Comoros Islands when his plane ran out of fuel. His left wing hit the water first, causing the plane to cartwheel. It was ripped to pieces. Of the 175 people on board, only 50 survived. Investigators soon learn that none of the major airlines use simulators to teach pilots how to land on water.
Training for ditching in a simulator is very difficult. We don't have the models to accurately simulate what an airplane would do when it touches down on water. Given the rarity of this type of event, it would be very difficult to justify training pilots for this type of event.
But even without ever going through a simulation, Captain Sullenberger got almost everything right. He kept the nose up and wings level. He let the tail hit the water first, slowing the jet down enough so that it survived the impact.
Nice flying.
NTSB investigators turned to their own simulation to answer a vital question.
This is the captain.
Did Sullenberger have to land in the Hudson?
Brace for impact.
Or could he have made it to a runway?
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549. Hit birds.
Investigators studied Chesley Sullenberger and Jeffrey Skiles' actions in the moments after their plane collided with birds.
Ignition.
We wanted to know, did the pilots do the right thing? So what we did in the simulator was we tested exactly that. Was there enough energy to make it back to LaGuardia? And what we found was that about 50% of the time we were able to make it back to the airport.
But when a 35-second delay is imposed after the bird strike to account for the crew's attempt to restart the engines, all of the simulator pilots crash before reaching the runway.
When we took into consideration the decision-making process that Captain Sullenberger went through, we realized that it was not possible to make it back to the airport.
Cactus 1549, runway 4 is available.
There's no doubt.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
Putting the plane in the Hudson was the right call. Sullenberger didn't have enough altitude to glide to either LaGuardia or Teterboro airports.
Got one roll. Both of them rolling back.
The investigators also discover that Sullenberger made a decision that wasn't at the top of the checklist, one that was critical to the survival of everyone on board.
I'm starting the APU.
On commercial jetliners, the engines provide power to electrical systems. If the engines stop working, the crew eventually loses those systems. The APU is an emergency generator that keeps some things running.
The APU allowed him to still see his screens, the instruments still work.
It also allowed the A320 itself to assist with the heroic landing. The APU provided power to the plane's electronic brain, stopping the pilots from making any potentially dangerous moves. It kept them inside a so-called flight envelope.
By starting the APU early in the sequence, the flight crew was able to maintain the flight envelope protections, which prevented the airplane from stalling when the airspeed got too slow.
He's right on the edge of stall speed.
The flight data shows that Sullenberger was going slower than the ideal speed.
The airspeed during the accident sequence got about 20 knots slower than it should have been for this flight.
But the A320's flight computer is designed to constantly adjust the plane's pitch and keep it from stalling.
We definitely could have had a much more catastrophic outcome had the airplane actually stalled.
Starting the APU.
Sullenberger's quick thinking made sure the plane's complex computer system kept working. It gave him an automated safety net, so he'd have the best chance to do the nearly impossible.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
It was a combination of a good crew and a good airplane.
Let's go. Put the flaps out.
The captain had the presence of mind, for instance, just before they were about to land, a couple of 100 feet in the air, to turn to the first officer and ask,
"Got any ideas?"
Actually, not.
They were both coordinating right up to the end, and that's what we like to see.
Skill, training, and the aircraft's very design combined to save the lives of 155 people. But investigators still want to know how birds crippled two highly advanced jet engines, and if they can stop it from happening again. 8 days after the crash, investigators are finally able to examine the engines in detail. Richard Dolbear has spent much of his career studying collisions between birds and airplanes.
When aircraft strikes a bird, generally there's not much left of the bird, particularly if that bird goes through the engine.
The engines are analyzed piece by piece to try and figure out exactly what happened 3,000 feet above New York.
Let's look inside.
We expose the engine surfaces to a black light. Proteins from many tissues will fluoresce with a black light. Much of the tissue was already gone, but many of the proteins stayed on the surfaces of the engine.
Look at that.
Deep in the right engine, investigators find about a cup of charred remains.
Most of the remains found were just muscle tissue, bone fragments, and minuscule feather remains. I was able to find about 29 samples in one engine and 14 in the other.
But the engines aren't the only part of the plane that's been damaged.
Birds.
Whoa! The aircraft hit many birds. So we found evidence on the wings and on the flaps and on the fuselage, but the plane can still fly when that occurs.
The threat posed by bird strikes is well known.
Bird strikes are a much bigger problem than the general public realizes. In the last 20 years, there have been approximately 210 aircraft that have been destroyed because of collisions with birds.
This Boeing 757 ingested a crow while taking off from Manchester, England, later landing safely. In 2008 alone, there were 4 dramatic accidents. A Boeing 747 sucked a kestrel into one of its engines. The crew aborted takeoff and survived. The plane was ruined. This jet ingested pelicans into both engines, and one ended up in the cockpit. Repairs cost $2 million. The engine of an MD-10 was severely damaged by a gadwall. The repair cost was $900,000. And 5 people were killed when this Cessna smashed into at least one pelican. More than 200 people have died in bird strike accidents since 1988. The problem could get worse because there are more birds out there.
By restricting the use of pesticides that were hazardous to birds, such as DDT, we've seen a tremendous rebound in the populations of bird species. A remarkable increase in the Canada geese that are resident, non-migratory birds. Nationwide, the population has grown from about 1 million to about 4 million.
At LaGuardia, one of the airport's biggest problems is a year-round goose colony on nearby Rikers Island.
From the year 2002 to 2004, there were 8 Canada goose strikes at LaGuardia Airport involved birds either on the airport or right off of the airport. One of those strikes almost caused a plane to crash, and it was a very close call.
For the past several years, airport officials have rounded up hundreds of geese from Rikers Island and euthanized them. It's controversial, but should be effective.
So, where did these birds come from?
If the geese that hit US Airways Flight 1549 were local, they can be controlled. Investigators need to know more about them.
The remains that we did find were so small that we couldn't really tell what type of birds. We enlisted the help of the Smithsonian Institution. They can take remains, even very small remains, small pieces of feathers or flesh or whatever, and they can identify them.
The hope is that DNA analysis of the remains will not only confirm the bird's species, but also offer clues as to where they came from. While they wait for answers, investigators turn to answering the question of how a few birds forced a 68-ton jet from the sky. Before they can be used in a passenger jet, engines undergo rigorous testing to prove they can perform under extreme conditions. The tests include ingesting frozen bird carcasses. The CFM turbofan engines that power the A320 passed those tests and was certified in 1996.
The large bird test required for the CFM engine is shooting a 4-pound bird from an air cannon into the engine, which is running at near full power.
To pass, the engines don't have to keep running. They only have to stay together, which they did on Sullenberger's plane.
Well, the engines did not experience what we call uncontained failures. No large chunks of fan blades or anything flew out through the cowls to hurt people inside the airplane.
Fan blades are always the most interesting part to look at, and they often tell quite a story.
A series of fan blades throughout the engine compress incoming air until it's ignited in the core, creating thrust. Ingested birds can wreak havoc on this process.
When a fan blade of an engine fails, it causes a lot of continuing damage. In this particular case, all the fan blades were there. They suffered severe damage, but none were broken.
An analysis of the engines shows that while the primary fan blades survived the impact, the delicate machinery inside the cores of both engines did not.
Uh-oh. We got one roll, both of them rolling back.
Once we went into the engine itself, into the core, we determined that there was significant damage. When a bird gets ingested into the core, it is such a large mass compared to these blades that it does a lot of damage to them.
The birds ingested into Flight 1549.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Cactus 1549.
Ripped apart the engine's compressors. Metal shards from these broken compressors were sucked deep into the cores of both engines, shutting them down.
We've hit birds, we've lost thrust in both engines.
When DNA results come back from the Smithsonian Institution, investigators finally understand why Flight 1549 lost both its engines. The birds that struck Sullenberger and Skiles' aircraft were adult Canada geese. They were far larger than anything the engines were ever tested for.
Because of that analysis, we know that these birds ingested each probably weighed about 10 pounds.
The tests also confirmed that as many as 4 large birds had hit Flight 1549's engines. It was simply too much for them to handle.
Rarely do birds get ingested into the core of the engine. Rarely does an engine ingest the bird and then stop running completely. That's a very rare event.
Ignition start.
What makes this one even rarer is that both engines ingested birds and both shut down.
We're going to be in the Hudson.
The DNA test also proves that the geese involved in this accident were not the local geese that LaGuardia has worked so hard to manage.
These were geese that had been in northern Canada during the preceding summer. They were migratory geese.
The collision between the migrating geese and Flight 1549 happened 7 kilometers from the airport. It means that none of the existing programs for reducing the number of birds would have prevented the collision. It also means that what happened to that flight could happen again, unless a way can be found to keep birds and planes apart.
Romeo Whiskey 2-1, radar contact, Walsh, report 20 DME southeast
Every year, about 2 million planes pass over New York's airspace.
Most people do not appreciate the problems that birds can cause to aircraft. They don't realize how a small, seemingly insignificant organism in relation to the size of an aircraft can cause these kinds of catastrophic failures.
The airline industry needs to find solutions to bird strikes. Placing screens in front of the engines is one of the most obvious answers, but there are serious drawbacks.
Screens can fall off, screens can break, and then they would be ingested into the engine, causing similar damage or more catastrophic damage.
Screens can also introduce turbulence to the airflow, which can starve the engines of air, causing them to fail. Winter weather is also a serious problem for engine screens.
A screen is a perfect ice builder, and it will accrete ice very quickly in icing conditions.
A more promising solution is already being tested in several American cities, including New York. At John F. Kennedy Airport, specialized radar is sweeping the skies looking for birds near planes. Most airports are equipped with radar that sends out radio waves that simply bounce off objects in the sky. Typically, only large objects are seen, and most of this information isn't passed along to air traffic controllers.
The fact is that their scopes would be cluttered with things. Tall masts from ships, for instance, would pop up on their radar as low targets. The clutter, in fact, would interfere with air traffic control, and that's not a good thing.
But now, finely calibrated avian radar is being tested at JFK. It can distinguish items the size of hummingbirds. If any birds are detected moving through flight paths, crews could be alerted.
I would love to see bird radar technology. The key would be how to incorporate that without increasing workload to an already stressed controller.
Tests continue, but widespread use of avian radar is still years away.
Cactus 1549, runway 4, clear for takeoff.
Cactus 1549, clear for takeoff.
Until then, collisions between birds and planes will continue. What the safe outcome of Flight 1549 proved is that right now, the best defense against this threat is a good team in the cockpit.
We had a very experienced flight crew with very good training.
My aircraft.
Your aircraft.
Get the QRH.
All your training that you've done, all the years that you've been flying the airplanes, it all just comes back to you when you need it.
My aircraft.
Sully and I worked together extremely well on this event. I knew what was in his mind, and he knew what was in my mind. We were both accomplishing our individual roles, but we had a knowledge of the whole situation.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left, heading 220.
220.
This event definitely puts things in perspective for you as a controller. One thing I appreciate more, the teamwork and how when you work together, you can pretty much accomplish whatever you need to accomplish.
Off to your right side is Teterboro Airport. You want to try and make Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
The landing in the Hudson took training and skill. It also took a bit of luck.
We had a very clear day. We had a perfect condition for the river. So there was just a series of really fortunate events that occurred that assisted this crew in landing successfully on the river.
Well, at the safety board, we don't really deal in miracles very often, but this event had a lot of things that came together at the right time and the right place. And so a lot of us are thinking, well, maybe we do have a miracle here.
What a view of the Hudson today.